Welcome to the Artist Notepad, where we explore artistry, we talk life, and we talk deep tan pizza. More like deep pan pizza, am I right? I'm Jack.
And I'm David. Sorry for that corny joke. Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of Faith Part 2 with just us today. Today we're going to be talking about faith once again and just pick up from where we last went off. But first, Jack, how you doing, bro?
Yeah, man. I mean, one hand, I'm pretty excited because this is our first official Deep Tan episode. So that's very exciting for us. But as I'm sure all you listeners are aware of, there's been quite a bit of unease happening in the US, particularly in Minneapolis, with all the rallies that are happening, the riots that are happening at the moment, all the issues regarding racism, which have once again arisen to the surface. They've always been there. Now we're talking about them more than normal. And there will come a time where this quiets down and we won't be talking about them as much anymore, but it'll still be there. And yeah, look, I don't want to dwell too much on it, but I just like to say that my heart goes out to everyone out there, particularly in Minneapolis, but just all around the world, people who have to deal with this kind of systemic racial abuse. It's just horrifying, and I feel, I even like I'm not a person of color, but it still affects me so much, and my heart goes out to every person of color, but just everyone who's ever had to deal with some kind of oppression because of their race or their gender or their, anything that makes them different. It really breaks my heart. It's horrible. I wish we could just love each other a bit more, but it's there.
Amen to that. Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought, David and I both thought we should mention it because it's happening. And we've been talking about the COVID situation, so this is more important than that, in my opinion. People may disagree with me, but this COVID pandemic has been happening for a few months. Racism is just like, it's an ancient form of abuse, and yeah. David, do you have anything to say on it? I should stop talking because I could go on.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough topic to kind of even bring up, but I think like even if we kept silent about it, I think we wouldn't be respecting, or we wouldn't be adding anything good, or if we just ignored it. So yeah, thanks for even mentioning it right now. Definitely, like, it's something that like just brings a lot of anger, brings frustration, brings a lot of like, makes me tired, man. It makes me like, it really drains me when I see this type of injustice, on this type of treatment to human beings who are created the same. The only difference is the complexion, but like this type of thing exists. It really just sickens me, and like it drains me. And we had a bit of miscommunication today where I thought we were gonna be unpacking this, but and like I was feeling really just drained. Like I was just lying on my bed, thinking about the topic and stuff like that. But
it's heavy stuff, man. But we like it needs to be talked about, I suppose. As you said, like I feel we feel a responsibility. Like we're talking about stuff, we're putting our opinions out there, and like we've got some great feedback that people appreciate what we're saying. And I feel like it's important for us to bring up, and I'm glad we did. But as you were saying, David?
Yeah. Just because like I didn't want to dwell on a sad note for too long, I was just gonna say like it's been getting a little bit better in terms of just like interactions and like day-to-day or like day-to-day, week-to-week lifestyle for myself. I don't want to like steal the spotlight or anything like that, but like just like on a positive note, I've been doing really well. Been able to enjoy people's company, and like things seem to be slowly getting back to normal, which is good as well. But yeah, man. I mean,
That definitely is a positive note.
yeah,
But I suppose with all the all the negative stuff going on in the world, all the struggle, whether it's the virus, whether it's in Australia, we've kind of had disaster after disaster for the last 9 months or so, with the fires, with the flooding afterwards, storms. There's a lot happening around the world right now, and then there's the stuff that always happens, and then we only sometimes talk about it, and it sort of creates this question when it comes to faith. And we sort of hinted on it in Faith Part 1 at the end, but David, why don't I'll give you the stage for this one, and maybe for this episode I might sort of take the, pardon the pun, the devil's advocate position for this, and I might just sort of push you a little bit, see what we can get out of you. You're someone who's maybe a lot more knowledgeable, well, definitely a lot more knowledgeable about Christianity than I am. So here's a very tough question for you, and it's related to everything happening. Why would a good and a sovereign God allow pain and suffering to exist in the world?
Dang. Yeah, man. I mean, that's a big package you just kind of dropped on top of me, but I'll try my best to answer that question. I feel like you got to be sensitive when it comes to this question, especially right after what we talked about.
Absolutely, yeah. But it's a hard one, man.
Yeah, I loved how you just pushed it to me. But yeah, thank you for that. No, I'd love to talk about it. I think I have different approaches to this question depending on who asks me. But one thing that I think I like to always point to is that, like, the answer that Christianity gives to suffering and pain, and just to dig into that, it's God is sovereign. That's what we believe. So he is in control of everything. He is omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient. So he's everywhere. He's all knowing, and he can do anything he wants. And the second part to what I'm going to say is that God is also a God who understands suffering. He's a suffering God. And the reason I say that is because that was shown and it was manifest in the person of Jesus, who is fully man, but also fully God. And he went through the worst kind of suffering that man could probably go through. He lived 33 years on this earth, but he lived a life of teaching. He lived a life of people loving him and following him. And then he did 3 years of ministry, but in those 3 short years, it turned completely upside down for him. So he went through what it's like to be, hated by everyone. He was spat on, he was whipped, he was like suffered until the point of death on a cross, which is it's a type of death where a type of torture that's like, hard to imagine what it would actually feel like. Yeah, but so when I say that, it's like God understands man's suffering, and God understands our pains, and he cares. And it shows that he cares because he himself came down and he suffered so that we don't have to suffer anymore. So the Christian answer to suffering is that suffering isn't meaningless, because at the end, for those who are Christians, those who believe in Jesus, will come to a point of glory, or come to a point of no suffering, or heaven, to say it basically.
I had a idea that a question that I never really had before. When you said, you were talking about all the suffering, and then you're like, Jesus suffered so that we don't have to suffer. And I've always like sort of known that from a Christian perspective, but we do. So what does that mean? What does that expression mean to you when you hear Jesus suffered so we don't have to suffer? Obviously, like, at least you and I, we're not suffering to that extent,
right.
But there are people out there who are. So what does that really mean?
I get what you're saying, and I think I missed the important part in that. yes, there is suffering each and every single day, but the suffering I think I was trying to focus and pinpoint is the wage of sin being death. And Jesus came, and when I say so that we don't have to suffer anymore, is that he opened the door and he paid for our sin. So he's brought atonement for our sin. Do you know what I'm saying? So suffering, and that's why I added that, like, suffering, like Christianity says that suffering isn't meaningless, because the life that we live here and the suffering that we go through, it's not just so that we suffer, but it's because the effects of sin still remain. But for people who put their faith in Jesus, have a life after death, or when he returns, where there won't be any more sin, and everything will be like, well, that's the day of when judgment comes. So yeah, I don't know if I said that right. So are you following? Like,
are you saying that when we say that he died so that we don't have to suffer anymore, is that sort of like a, not necessarily in this moment, but a, you know, he just shouted us all, you know, entry into the club, and in the club there is no suffering, but we don't get to the club until, you know, we pass on to heaven. Is that, are you talking about a afterlife of no suffering, or are you talking about this life that we're in right now?
I'm pointing towards more the afterlife. Right,
gotcha.
And another part of it it's not just the ticket to the club, but it's like a, I don't want to use a broad analogy because it's a sensitive like, I don't want to get the doctrine.
Come on, man, I love insensitive analogies.
So I would say, like, it gives reason for why we,
I feel like I'm doing a good job of being devil's advocate if I'm making it.
Yeah, you're doing really good. You're getting me to think and like be really careful of how I say things. But I'd say that for Christians, we have it might sound a bit weird, but we can find comfort even when we suffer. So something that I think point to is like early disciples, or even like we were just talking about this earlier, missionaries who were persecuted in the past to the point of death, or even Jesus' disciples who were persecuted and then they faced death because of their faith, right? So they lived a life that like pointed, or like kind of gone through even similar death to what Jesus died, dying on the cross. Some of them were crucified as well. And these people, they understand that their lives or their deaths aren't in vain, because after they die, they know that their eternity is rested with Jesus. Do you know what I'm saying? So they can, even in death, they can go with joy and hope. As weird as that sounds, because it's like the cause that I am dying for isn't in vain.
I find heaven an interesting one, man. You know, because like I think we briefly touched on this in Faith Part 1, but I feel like there is evidence that there is a God. You know, I feel like there is evidence that points towards it. Like, it's not conclusive evidence by any means, but when we're talking about, it's like even scientific level, like there are things that just cannot be explained, like phenomena. And I feel like that, you know, that can be used as evidence to point towards a God. But when it comes to heaven, man, like that's a whole nother thing, that like it all comes down to trust in the word and nothing more. Like for someone to tell you, hey man, like all this suffering you feel right now, like don't worry about it, because after you die, you're going to go somewhere else where it's all good. And it's like, I feel like that's a hard justification to make to someone who's going through a really tough time, you know, to tell them, don't worry, man, when you die, you'll be fine.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I know. But that's why I was saying, like, depending on the context of the question that is being brought, just say it's a personal, like someone has lost a loved one or someone very dear to them, and they came and asked me this question, I think I wouldn't approach it with the answer that I just gave you.
Sure.
Like, I'll be very careful in how I answer it, because it's like,
absolutely.
if it's like off a basic, like, why is there suffering, and it was just like a fresh question, then I think I would have answered it this way. But to those people, I think they're not saying they're not. If God willing and the conversation leads to that way, then I can share what I just shared, but in a more gentle manner.
Sure. Here's a hard one. Okay, here's a really hard question. Maybe it won't be hard for you, but
Sure. Got me sweating here, bro. Whew.
if it seems that like this whole life is just a lead up to the afterlife, then how can, as a Christian, we feel motivation to and meaning within this life if it seems that like everything's pointing towards what comes next? How do we find meaning, and how can we be motivated to live a certain way, or to live, for God, other than just to get us into the club at the end of it?
Yeah. So it's almost like, what's the point if you're a Christian? What's the point of continuing to live? Why don't you just, like, I don't know, like, take your own life, because you'll go to heaven or something, right?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, that's a bit
like,
more extreme, but sure. Like, more not even to do with like ending your life, but just to do with like living it to its maximum capacity. Because if things are pointing towards like, well, it's like, it's more about what comes next than what comes now. Like, I'm sure there are things that would counter that I'm sure you're about to whip me with. You're about to whip out some quotes from the Gospels. But yeah, how do we find meaning and motivation in a life which seems to just be preparing us for what comes next?
That's a really good question. And like, the more and more you bring me these questions, it really challenges me, but in a good way. So thank you. The answer that I would give to that is that the life as a Christian, once you have found your identity in Christ, and you look forward to entering the club, but the club isn't about just like being in a paradise, no suffering, good place, but it's really just being with Jesus and all his glory. But the duty that Jesus gives us while we're still on this earth is that for his kingdom to be expanded. He says, go to all nations and tell of the good news. Tell people of me, and bring people to faith. Not by your own works, but through the working of the Holy Spirit.
So it's like getting as many plus ones as you can to come to the club with you before you go.
Yeah, but it's not just about that. It's like living this life that you have been given by God to glorify him and to enjoy the process as well. Because what we understand is that the life that we live isn't meaningless, it's meaningful, and God has a plan for each and every single one of our lives, and we all have different stories that we have, and we bring to bring his kingdom forward. The chief end of man is to glorify God, make his goodness known, and to enjoy him. So does that kind of answer? I feel
it sounds like a very minimalist view on life. Like it's that there's a mentor that I've had in my life. He always says this thing to me. He always says, subtract, subtract, subtract. And he always says it to me. Every time I see him, I'll be talking about something that I'm struggling with, and he'll just look at me and he'll be like, Jack, subtract, subtract, subtract. And what he means is there's too much going on. You're missing the point. There's so much going on that you're missing the point. And he wants me to keep taking things out of my life until I find out what's really meaningful. And it's such a challenge. And he says like he's been doing it like for a long time, and it's so hard to just slowly let go of these things that you hold as important, to find out that once you let them go, that they're not really that important. And it sounds like what you're saying is that this is like that game on a whole nother level. You're really just letting go of everything until it's just down to you, your relationship with God and the word, and your mission to spread the word and to get all your plus ones to come to the club with you at the end.
Maybe to tie everything together, I think what I want to point to is like hope. And with that being in the club, there's all pain and all suffering will vanish, and all that had happened before in your life that you might have grieved and like prayed to God and suffered through, everything that had happened will be answered by that experience. It will all be he will be sufficient for all that had happened. Yeah, a glory that's so great and so amazing that all the big and the crazy things that you've witnessed in your life seem so small and like seems to just fade away. I feel like that's what we hope and look into as a life as a Christian. But it doesn't mean that we should just waste our lives and like be like, oh yeah, I believe in Jesus. But it's like if you follow the word, you can see how he actually wills for you to live. Yeah.
Do you believe that each one of us has an individual purpose?
Our purpose is to glorify God, right? But I feel like we all have individual stories and skills and talents that God uses and has crafted in us to make it happen. If we look at spiritual gifting in the word, someone might be blessed with a gift of teaching and a gift of leadership, and they might become a pastor. But something that's underlooked is like the gift of serving. That's a gift as well. Being able to be someone who loves to serve others, loves to serve God, and they might be super active in the church or even in work or just in their friends or relationships and stuff like that. So I feel like we all have the same goal of coming to God and enjoying him and just glorifying him. But our stories and the way that we might undergo that task of making him known is different. I feel like one unique experience that I get to have is that the music that I love making, of originally wanting to just make rap music and talking about, like we talk about it with T, but like shaking ass, to now wanting to make like gospel music. I feel like that's another way God has crafted me to be a witness and be used that in trying to bring people to him. So that's one as well. So yeah, does that kind of answer? Like, what do you think? Like,
I think we do. I think we do all have a purpose.
Yeah.
And I feel like you're not going to like this, hey? You're not going to like what I'm about to say. I feel like just saying that your purpose is to glorify God is to oversimplify it, because I don't think it's as simple as that. I think, yes, that God would want that, but I also think he wants you to have your own path and your own journey. And I think he wants something different out of every one of us. And I think he has things planned, little ways that we're going to influence other people, like little things that, like little opportunities that we'll receive, which can open so many doors for us and like make things happen and give us the opportunity to be an agent for change, even in the smallest way, even if it's just, some words come to your head and you end up saying something really wise that you don't normally say, and you say it to the right person at the right time, and you don't even know, but maybe that saved that person's life. Or maybe what you said to them, they then said it to someone else. They were just like, hey, my mate just said this the other day, and they don't think anything of it, but it's the next person who gets affected. All these little things which I think are so important, and I don't think that I think they can be for the glorification of God without like your sole purpose just being to glorify God. I do think that we all have something special that we're here to do. And this same mentor that I referred to before, he said to me this one time when I was going through a bit of a rough patch and I wasn't feeling very confident in myself and I didn't feel much self-worth, and I was struggling to see myself as in any light of importance. And he said to me, Jack, there's a little template of you, like a little silhouette of you cut out in God's heart. And he said, and it only fits you. It doesn't fit anyone else. And he said, and it's a very special place and it's only for you. And you're the only person who can feel that. And he said, you're the only one who can do what you're going to do in this world. And I don't know. I felt it just then. Like I felt like just like wow, like that's true. Like, and I believe that that's the same for everyone. I feel like there's every single person. There is a silhouette of you somewhere in the world waiting for you to fill it, and it might be in the tiniest way. It might be in a massive way. Like you look at some people who change the world for the better, and it might be that. I don't know. I personally feel like yeah. Go on.
I would say so. Maybe I came off in the way where it's like I made it super like oversimplified, and maybe I think I did, but I was kind of saying what you're saying right now. So
right, okay.
when I say so when I like, but just on the focus of like everything that we are meant to do is trying to point to God's glory. So even if we're like, I'm not saying like we have to always be just, you know, I'm trying to be so careful all the time, but it's like, it's not that.
Okay, let me give you an example. It might actually help you guide on what you're saying. So for example, you know, we look at the commandments, right? And so these are like things that are deeply ingrained in our system of morality, and even agnostic people, secular people, they see these things most of the time and they agree with it as well. And a lot of our systems of morality that have been established within Western society have been formed by Christian values that have just formed through society over time, and these are the things that we think are good, and these are the things that we think are bad. A lot of these things, the right and wrong, the perception of right and wrong, come from Christianity. So, for example, when we're doing these things that are right or the good and just, or we're avoiding these things that are wrong because they're bad and they're evil, we might even as a Christian, we might necessarily not be doing them for God in the time. But you're saying that because it's from God, it's still pointing towards God? Or do you think there has to be an intention there with every single thing you do that it's for God?
It's so what I was trying to say was that all the actions, the words, the path that we might want to take is under God's word, where it's like you're guided by not just by selfish ambition, right? But at the end to really point to God. I'm not wording it right. Sorry, man. Like
no, it's all good. I'm pushing you hard. I'm trying to get a lot of good stuff out of you all at once. So.
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah. I'm trying to explain the best way I can, but it's like, so what I agreed with what you said earlier about how like you might make someone's day, or how a conversation may lead to someone like you saving someone's life, or you know, playing a part in someone, like you being a puzzle piece, and just say us being in Sydney and us doing a podcast and talking about faith in this way and stuff like that, right? It's like that's a unique personal path that God has crafted. But I'm saying the ultimate goal that I see as Christians is that we want to make known his goodness. So the reflection of how my character, what I say, what I do, and how I conduct myself, and what I talk about, like us refraining from like swearing, or like us refraining from like, you know, like even mentioning the injustice that we see and seeing that it's not right, and wanting love. These type of things is to make people wonder like, oh, this person and his values, like what does he live for? And this Jesus that he's trying to follow, this God he's trying to follow, like who is his maker? Who's this God that he's trying to talk about and follows? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like my life should reflect him and how good he is.
I guess on a really like on a minutia level, like not everything has to be pointing in that one direction. But when you like zoom out and you take like a wide lens focus on it, then you can see that everything in the bigger picture is pointing in that direction. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because I don't think we got there in the perfect. End. Yeah, far out. I'm so sorry. It took us so long.
No, it's all good, bro. It's all
like,
good.
Yeah.
Do you want to hear about what I think about suffering?
Oh yeah. So Jack, what do you think about what do you think about the question of suffering? Sorry, I didn't ask you that.
Thank you for asking, David.
Yes.
So, okay. Here we go, guys. Let's get on board. Let's get on board this train.
This is what we've been waiting for.
So I have a similar idea about suffering to you, I think, but it actually is more of a way that might be relatable to people who aren't faithful. And I do wonder if you don't believe in God and you've listened through to this point, and you're not just doing it because you're trying to help us with our streams, then I really respect you, because to listen to all that commentary, which is quite obviously heavily focused on a God that you may not believe in, I respect you for being able to sit back and listen to everyone's views. So here's a little nugget that might be useful for you. And I see this as applicable in both a Christian context, or a God context, and an agnostic context.
Okay.
I think suffering is an essential part of life. I think that it is not just a part of life. I think suffering is essential. And the reason why is because, let's take a board game, for example. All right, a game. A game is actually not defined by what you're allowed to do. It's defined by what you're not allowed to do. That's how a game is made, right? So, for example, in chess, if every piece on the chessboard could do whatever it wanted to, then the game would finish in one move, you know? It would just like, all right, I won, next game, you know? Like, the whole point of chess is that some things can do less than others, you know? Some can move in diagonally, some can only move, you know, parallel, or you know what I mean. You guys know what I mean. Every single character has got a different thing. And every single game you pick out, the rules are defined by what you're not allowed to do. And that's what gives the game meaning. That's what makes it exciting. That's what makes it interesting. It's actually what you're restricted by. And I do firmly believe that life is not just about what you can have. It's about what you can't have. And that's what creates meaning a lot of the time, is suffering. Actually, as horrible as it is, and as hard as it is to try and justify some of the things that happen in the world, like, it actually restricts us in a way that creates freedom. And I know that sounds so paradoxical, but if we could do whatever we want, if everyone could do whatever we want, there would actually be a lack of freedom, because everyone could do what they want. There wouldn't be any such thing as freedom. And there's a corny expression, you know, it's like, you can't appreciate the good if you don't have the bad. And I know it's a bit corny, but like, it comes from a place of truth, that expression. No matter how cheesy it is, it comes from an expression of truth. And that is that without the opposite, you can't recognize the truth of that thing. You can't fully appreciate goodness until you have to really suffer first. You know, there's certain things that we take for granted. You know, I'm sure, like, if anyone listening out there has a disability and it has come later on in life, I'm sure they could tell you all about this. The idea that at one point, for example, at one point they could see. Then something horrible happens and they lose the ability to see. And then they really appreciate sight. But not only do they appreciate sight, and this is where it gets interesting, those people don't just appreciate sight, but suddenly all of their senses become more valuable, and you start to see things in a different light. And so it would seem that with these restrictions, new appreciations start to blossom. More meaning is found in areas where we weren't even looking before. And I really believe with all my heart that every time of suffering provides the opportunity for goodness and for growth. And some people out there might just always be getting kicked down and down and down again. And they're just like, what are you talking about, Jack? You've got no idea. And like, I don't about your situation. I don't. If you're someone who has to constantly be struggled, then I'm sorry that you have to go through that. But I really believe that you would have some sense of wisdom that I don't have, that you can put towards something good. And I firmly believe that all the goodness that comes out of the world starts from a place of suffering or a place of restriction, because people don't really appreciate what goodness is until they've really experienced bad. And I don't think that I could be so moved by certain acts of kindness that I see if I hadn't seen other things on the TV, like what I've been seeing over the last week, things like that, like, which just really, they just make you so thankful for what you have. As hard as it is sometimes to be grateful in the face of adversity, in the face of tragedy. I do think I do really try to from a Christian perspective to see God in all things, but from an agnostic perspective, just see goodness in all things, to see love like where it's there, instead of getting consumed by all this darkness. So, and it's so easy, and it's happened to me this week. And David, from what you were describing to me about feeling exhausted, I think it's sort of happening to you a little bit as well. Like, it's so hard not to, just with all this stuff going on, just to let it sort of take over you a little bit. But like, even in these horrible scenes, and I know I said I didn't want to talk too much about it, but I guess it's very topical. But even in these horrible scenes, like, and you know, I'm not promoting violence or anything, but seeing the way people are banding together as a people, like white people, black people, Asian people, Hispanic people, all joining together to raise arms against injustice. Like, there's goodness, there's beauty, there's love in that. Even if it's being manifested in anger. We feel anger because of love, ironically. It's because we love these people and we know that this is wrong. That's why we get angry. In this particular context. So I do think that without suffering, there'd be no meaning to life, because it's sometimes like sometimes life's just about getting over the next obstacle. Like, that's what some people live. Like, their whole lives is just getting past the next thing that pops up, and the next thing and the next thing, and learning how to live a life of gratitude and a life of happiness and fulfillment and meaning, whilst constantly in the battlefield of suffering. And for all those out there listening right now who are really going through it or really suffering with something, I challenge you. I challenge you to find meaning in your suffering, because it is there. I promise you that it is. There's something there that you can take. And even if it seems like minuscule compared to the hectic situation that you might be going through, like, it's there. There is meaning even in these darkest places. You know, without without light, there is no shadow. You cannot be in the shadow if there's no light. Shadow only exists because there is light. So if you feel like you're in the shadow right now, then you just got to find out where that light's coming from, even if it's a tiny little dot, you know. And it may not seem like much, but I do believe that there's a learning experience and there's goodness from every place of suffering. I'll get off my soapbox now.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing, Jack. Wow. Like, it seemed like you're really ready to shoot your answer for that one.
No, actually,
that's like
I have been thinking about it a bit, but I definitely wasn't planning to say all that. That just sort of came up. But yeah, I do think it's just because of everything that's happening at the moment. I'm feeling very, this stuff is all going on in my head right now. And that was sort of just a little insight into the positive side of what's going on in my head.
I mean, one thing I agree with you in that is like say I was saying, like, I would approach suffering differently depending on, like, the question of suffering differently depending on how the person asks and the context they're in. Like, one example that I would give to someone was like similar to what you were just saying, but it's like, because we all live unique stories and we go through different types of suffering and different types of events in our lives, we're able to become a vessel, or like someone who comes out from like depression, or like from losing a loved one, or, you know, going through injustice. It's like, if a person who comes out from that experience can become a shoulder to lean on, or a person can really, someone who can minister to someone in times of need. So like, yeah, so I think that's like something that's like shows that suffering isn't meaningless.
Yeah. Just on what you were saying, this is like a slightly different idea. So Amelia, she's studying to be an OT, and she's just done a placement, and she was actually telling me about, I can't remember exactly what they're called. This is bad. I should remember, but For example, she was just doing a placement in a schizophrenia ward. Sorry, my mistake. It was a mental health ward, but there were people in there with schizophrenia. And there was this particular woman who worked there who actually has schizophrenia. And she's just there kind of for like moral support, but as someone who they can't, because they can point to all the nurses and all the OTs and say, you don't know what it's like, but they can't point to this person. And this person is literally there just to be that empathetic like presence that can just be like, I know what it's like, but we're trying to help you, you know? And there are people, not every hospital has them, but there's people who like in mental health wards and in disability wards who work there just as someone who's been through trauma, who's been through struggle, who's going through it right now, like kind of like, Alcoholics Anonymous, the AA meetings, it's, I may be wrong by this, but I think they're all led by someone who has been an alcoholic. I might be wrong there, but I think that a lot of them
would
are.
Make sense though, yeah.
Either a lot of them are or all of them are. And that's because, that person knows what it's like. Not exactly, no one knows exactly what you're going through, but that doesn't mean that no one has any idea. Like you're not alone completely, people understand to a level. They obviously haven't lived in your exact situation, but if you've gone through something, man, then there are people out there who are going through the same thing as you. And I almost see it like, maybe this is a bit harsh, but I almost see it as your responsibility to, if you're doing better now, to try and help those who are in the place that you were in, because you know how hard it is. And you know that most likely that group is not receiving the care that they deserve, because you can point to almost every single group who is suffering and they're not receiving the care that they deserve. Almost every single group. And I really do think that, as you said, like for you to have gone through something, maybe you lost someone, maybe it's mental health, maybe it's physical health, whatever it is. Maybe your parents split up, like maybe it's an addiction issue. Like there are other people going through what you're going through. And even if you're not even fully better, like just being there with each other. I know someone who every single time, so he's addicted. Okay, this is a bit heavier. He's addicted to pornography, like serious addiction. And he has some friends who are in the same boat. And every single time that they feel like they're about to, lose their battle against it, they call each other up and they just say, I'm about to do it. And I know it sounds a bit weird. It sounds a bit weird, but like every single time they do it and it stops them. It stops them from doing it because they just have someone there, a support person to just say, I know, man, I know what you're going through. I know it's hard, but like, sorry, wrong choice of words. But it's the same for everything. It's the same for drugs. It's the same for alcohol. It's the same for all these different addictions. To have someone there that you can just be like, hey, like I feel like I'm about to whatever, like to have someone there to be like, I know how it feels, man, but I'm here for you. You just got to hold on, like stay on the phone with me until you're cool. And this guy told me that every single time he got off, like by the time he got off the phone, he didn't have the urge anymore. There's strength in community.
Wow. Yeah, strength in community. For sure. I think a lot of Christians will have people that are like keep each other accountable in that way. Because like not similar, but something that Made by Who mentioned in his name explanation as well is that like he feels like lust is something that is like one of the most potent.
Man, I admire people who can talk about their own experience with things like pornography, because like I just find it such a weird topic. Like I don't think I'd be strong enough to be able to like have those conversations with my friends about it, because it's a bit of I guess it's a bit of a, there aren't many conversations that I struggle having with my friends, but like talking about like if they were having an issue with porn, like I would really struggle to think of what to say to that, because I don't know, it's kind of like a taboo topic, hey, and it's bad. I probably need to work on that. I probably need to just have some frank conversations with my friends about it and just talk about the topic until I'm more comfortable around it. But I really admire people, and I've actually on a retreat that I used to help run, I've actually like boys have gotten up in front of boys from their school and talked about their addiction to porn in front of like boys, like other boys, like these are like young guys like 17 years old, and I'm just awestruck, and I'm just like, wow, that takes guts, man. That takes guts.
People find strength in like community. Yeah.
But yeah, that's my view on suffering, is that I think it's not only for a reason, but I think it does provide us with meaning. Like, I know that sometimes in the midst of suffering, it can seem like things are meaningless because things can be so hard. But I do actually think that that it does provide you with an opportunity to fight for something as well. A real opportunity, and maybe it's not for you, maybe it's for someone else, but just an opportunity to really, like, take up arms for something that you're passionate about. So yeah, that's been the main question of the podcast, I reckon, is just about, like, how can we justify suffering if this world was made by a God that is good? But like someone once said to me, maybe you've heard this before, David. I might have actually said it to you before because I got really struck by it. I'm big for like an analogy or a quote or something. But this guy that I used to know said this thing to me. He said, trying to work out what God meant by something, or what he's trying to do in this world, or she is trying to do in this world, is like looking at the back of a painting. And when you look at the back of the painting, you see the canvas, and it's all like these weird, like, smudgy colors, and there's a bit of red there, a bit of blue there, a bit of yellow there, and it doesn't seem to like add up to anything at all. It's like, what the hell is going on here? But when you turn it around, you can really see what's happening. And this person said to me, he said, you'll never know what the other side of the painting looks like until you get to heaven. And he said, some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. Like, stop trying to work this all out. Like, there's going to be some things that you just won't understand until you're, in the presence of God. And like that's a very easy answer to give to why is there suffering in the world? Just like, well, we're not meant to understand it. Like, I think that we can do a bit more to try and work it out. But yeah, that's also what I'd say, is that there are things that are disguised, like gifts that are disguised as curses that are disguised as gifts, things that seem great for immediacy, but in the long term, they screw you up. Things that seem like a massive challenge and adversity and lots of obstacles and suffering, but in the end, they produce something beautiful, Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like a question that we can ask as like Christians is like, Jesus answers half the question, which is like, it shows that he is a God that cares and is a good God because he endured suffering as well, right? And a question that I think is worth mentioning when someone asks this question is like, can there be a good reason for why a good all-powerful God to allow it? Like, if he's a good and all-powerful God, then can there be a good reason for it? And it's like, yeah, it's like maybe there is a good reason, and maybe it is like something that we can only see once we reach heaven. And that's something that can't be answered, but the Christian view on suffering kind of helps answer half of it. Half of it being that he is a good and sovereign God, but the only thing that we're not aware of is that, like, what is the good thing that like, what's the good reason that he's allowing this to happen?
So, man, I don't know about you, but I reckon we wrapped that up pretty well. I know I put you under the pressure there for a large part of the podcast, but I think you held up pretty well. What do you reckon?
I hope so. I felt like I sounded very like all over. Like, I was a bit jumbled, but yeah.
And the magic of editing, I'll make you sound like, I don't know, a good talker. I couldn't think of anyone. Do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah,
I reckon we wrap it up. Well,
yeah,
guys, we've got another episode of Tan Artistry coming up next week, so stay tuned for that. We're going to be bringing on another guest. We're going to be talking about some creative business. And yeah, we got some cool stuff lined up for you guys. So I'm pretty excited. I don't know about you, David, but I'm pretty excited. So guys, stay tuned. Follow us on all of our social medias. You got Facebook, The Artist Notepad. Facebook.com/The Artist Notepad. You've got Instagram at The Artist Notepad. And then you can email us at artistnotepad@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any questions you guys have, any topics that you want us to tackle, especially now we're doing these Deep 10 episodes. David and I have been tossing around some ideas, but we'd love you guys to really give us some challenging topics that we can try our hand at. Please reach out. let us know how you guys are doing. We talked a bit about suffering today, and there's definitely going to be some of you guys who are suffering, and please feel, well, I can't speak for David, but I would just say, like, if you need someone to talk to, I am here. If you want to shoot me a message on Instagram, at Jack Sherlock or at the Artist Notepad. I don't know about you, David, whether you would be cool with that or not.
Hit me up as well. Hit me up. I'm always happy to talk to and chat to people.
Yeah, I mean, if you got any questions about Christianity, David's a great person to ask. He's a person of wisdom.
Oh, too kind, Jack. No, but yeah, I'd love to chat to people as well. I think one thing that like even brought up to like dinner tables and concerns is like a lot of people are isolated and they don't have that person to talk to, so they might be like going through a lot. So if you need to talk, hit me up at Chan David Chan on Instagram.
Yeah, thanks, guys. All right, well, I guess if that's that, we'll catch you next week.
We'll catch you next episode.
Peace.
Peace. Peace. Peace. Peace. Peace. Peace.